Progress.
I'm going to begin from Ois Tes. Since yesterday was Cheshvan, the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, so we will continue in the same topic as this Farbrengen. Husker La'el, it was mentioned earlier in the Farbrengen, Echad Ha'irayis Ha'ikri Shabalya Meledes, one of the main directives of the one whose birthday, which is Cheshvan, the Rebbe Rashab, we need to be candles to illuminate. This directive, though it is a very core and primary directive, it's only a matter of a point, without entering into the details of the matter. Therefore, in addition to that general directive, which is only in a point, we need to spend some time on an additional directive of the one whose birthday was Cheshvan, the Rebbe Rashab, that in that directive the matters come out in further detail. And the intention, what's my meaning? To his well-known talk, to his Sicha, that he said on Simchas Torah in the year Tafresh Samach Aleph, that would be 1881, or Tafresh Samach Aleph would be 1901, or actually 1900, the end of 1900. Concerning whoever goes out to the war of the house of David, that he talks about that topic, and he identifies in general the students of Tomchat Mimim as those that are going out for war on the behalf of the house of David. And the Rebbe is going to elaborate, and in his very inclusive manner, include all of us, men and women, even those that never saw the Rebbe Rashab, even those that didn't learn in Tomchat Mimim, within this war. So he says, Sheba Bir Barucha V'Protius, that in that Sicha the Rebbe Rashab explained at length and in detail as Tafkidam Shel Chayoli Beis David, the mission and the job of the soldiers of the house of David, Kil Kamon, as we will explain further on. The content of this Sicha in short, Beis David, what does it mean, the house of David? It's referring to the revelation of the light of the King Moshiach. Why? Because Moshiach is known as Moshiach ben David. He is a Moshiach, the son of David, meaning he's from the house of David. So the house of David means the revelation of Moshiach's light. So we know about Beis David. What's Milchemes Beis David, the war of the house of David? Is referring to the service of spreading the well springs outward. Came through that we affect the coming of Mashiach. What's the connection? Why is spreading the well springs outward considered that through that we affect the coming of Mashiach? Like the response of King Moshiach to the Baal Shem Tov when he made an Aliyah's Neshama. He went up to Gan Eden and he met Mashiach and he asked Mashiach, when is the master going to come? So Mashiach responded to the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will spread outward. When the well springs of the teachings of Chassidus, which is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, that's why the Mashiach was addressing it to the Baal Shem Tov and saying, your well springs, because Chassidus is considered the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, so it's his well springs. And it's not just the teaching, but also the manner, the ways of his service, what he taught about how we have to serve Hashem. Yefutzu ba'olam will spread out in the world. That's when Mashiach will come. So that's why the Rebbe identifies that what is the war of the house of David? What's the war to bring the revelation of the light of Mashiach? That is the war of spreading the well springs of Chassidus out. So the Rebbe's question is going to be very obvious. Why identify it with war? So the Rebbe says, why is it necessary to have an idea of a war? Since there are those that are opposing it. When you have opposition, then you need to fight the opposition. The Rebbe soon going to say that it's b'darchei noyim, b'darchei sholem, with a pleasant manner, but you still have to fight it. Like the Chazal said, if you see one generation after another generation who are scoffing, I will soon explain what that scoffing is. Look forward to the feet of Mashiach, meaning Mashiach is coming, because this is what's going to happen right before Mashiach's times, that there's going to be scoffers. My time, what's the reason? Where do we see this in a pasuk? Because it says, Asher cherfu oivecha Hashem, that they scoffed your enemies, Hashem, it says in Tehillim, Asher cherfu ikvis Mashiachecha, that they scoffed the heels of your Mashiach. So the Rebbe explains that there are two types of scoffers. In other places, the Rebbe speaks about this at great length. Koloimar, yeshnam beis dargis doiris shalmacharfim. There are two levels and generations of scoffers. Doirish, in the first generation, asher cherfu oivecha Hashem, those that were enemies of Hashem, and they are scoffers. Elu she'einem aminim b'Hashem b'toirosei v'mitzvosei. Those that do not believe in Hashem, they do not believe in His Torah, they do not believe in His mitzvahs, which was actually something that came to fruition during the times of Toim Chet Mimim, after the establishment of Toim Chet Mimim, during the last years of the Rebbe Rashab, during the years of the Frierdiker Rebbe. That was a generation that was a lot of attacks against Yiddishkeit. Then the Rebbe says there's another thing, V'dor Sheni, a second generation, a following generation, a generation after this generation, Asher cherfu ikvis Mashiachecha, that they scoffed the heels of your Mashiach. Shebesug zeh yichol nis afilu b'nei Torah. In this category are even people that are Torah Jews, people that do Torah mitzvahs. But their problem is, they are weak in the belief of the redemption and the belief of the coming of Mashiach. And that's why we need to go to war. We need to fight that approach that wants to deny or delay or wants to weaken our belief in Mashiach. That is the mission. That's the job of the soldiers of the army of the house of David. To go out to the war of the house of David. A war that's run not chas v'sholem in a way of hurt and pain and suffering, not with armies, not with strength, rather with my spirit. It's a war fought in a spiritual arena. Gilui v'afotzas pnimius haTorah, the revelation and the spreading of the inner part of the Torah, Torah's Chassidus, the teachings of Chassidus, v'chizuk ha'emunah begula ha'shlema de Mashiach tzidkeinu, and strengthening the belief in the complete redemption through Mashiach. Ad kan mitoichen asichem milgeil inyaneinu. Till here is the Rebbe made a summary of the content of this Sicha that the Rebbe Rashab said in Tavresh Samach Aleph, concerning what matters for the lesson that we're going to derive right now. And the Rebbe right away says, we know that the Sicha was addressed to the Bachrim and Toim Chet Mimim, but this is really a lot broader. Though the Sicha was addressed to the students that studied the Torah of the Rebbe Rashab in his 4 cubits, B'shivas Toim Chet Mimim Shel Lubavitch, in the yeshiva of Toim Chet Mimim in the city of Lubavitch, how does this apply when we find ourselves in Brooklyn, and not necessarily does the Rebbe say, are we talking to yeshiva bachrim? But just the opposite. The majority of the people that are participating in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe was saying the Sicha are not yeshiva bachrim. Halachas kam v'kama kasheloikim b'cheshvan kol elu sheshoyim mitzadvarim adim machshirim shoyim. This was a weekday Farbrengen. So the Rebbe says, how much more so when you take into account all those that are listening to what's being spoken about through different devices, in other words, via the telephone, via the hookup, the radio, etc. Then it's surely much smaller the percentage of yeshiva bachrim that are listening to this. How much more so? It's a very small percentage of the listeners are bachrim of Tamchet Mimim. Mikol Makim. Still in all, Yesh Leimer, we could say, should be a Meinu Elu. In these days, Shayach Madvarim Gam Lekol Echad Ve'echad Mi Yisrael, that all these things are applicable to every single Yid. And the Rebbe is going to go on with a whole example from somewhere else where we're going to skip, and we're going to go to the conclusion of the Rebbe's thought on this. So he says, top of the next page, at the beginning of the revelation, at the beginning of the era of the revelation of Teres Chassidus, which took place Bizmanam Shal Baal Shem Tov HaMagid, which took place during the time period of the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Magid, the student, the Mezritcher Magid, Haya Mismer Mitzumtzum Shal Talmidim, there was a very limited amount of disciples, Shem Osku Ba'afotas Teres Chassidus, they were involved in spreading the teachings of Chassidus. Ki Yadua Misipuri Chassidim Sheitz LaMagid Hoyu, like it's known from different stories of the Chassidim that by the Mezritcher Magid was, skip the parentheses, Kuf Chav Talmidim, 120 disciples, Sha'aleim Hutel Atafkid V'Ashlichas, that upon them was placed the mission, Lahafid as Teres Chassidus, to spread out the teachings of Chassidus. And call Lechad Mem Kibel Medina Mesyamas Chavel Mesuyim. Every one of the Talmidim of the Mezritcher Magid got to a certain country or a certain area that they were supposed to be involved in spreading Teres Chassidus. Let's skip over 3 paragraphs where it's all the brackets. Let's go down to the second paragraph from the bottom. And the days following that, the more that the teachings of Chassidus spread out further, so it was increased and added more and more Jews that were involved in the teachings of Chassidus and spreading it. So even though initially it was only 120 people that were responsible for spreading Chassidus everywhere, but generation after generation, more and more became involved in this job. This means to say, though initially this avodah was applicable only to certain specific individuals. Neshamas Klolius, general Neshamas, these were Rebbes. Each one became a Rebbe of a certain country, area, a Chassidic court. So they are a Neshama Klolius, because that's what the Rebbe is. Shaleim Hutal Lahafitz as Teres Chassidus b'Medina Shleima v'Kiyotze b'Zeh. And therefore, because they were a Neshama Klolius, they were a general soul, so therefore it was placed upon them the mission to spread the teachings of Chassidus in an entire country, etc. Generation after generation, as things progressed, so then this avodah became applicable to more and more Yidden. And alongside with this, parallel to this, the avodah of spreading Chassidus became easier. How come? Because this was corresponding to as much as they were able to affect and they were successful in spreading Chassidus on prior years. So the following years and the following generations are really just building on past generations. So it's much easier as the generations get further on and further on to spread Chassidus, because we already had much work and much groundwork laid already beforehand. It's known the Sicha of the Rebbe Rashab. The main idea of spreading the well springs outward. It began after the redemption of the Alter Rebbe of Yudas Kislev of the year Tavkuf Nun Tes, and from then on, they were involved since the Alter Rebbe was released from imprisonment in Yudas Kislev in the late 1700s. They were involved in spreading the well springs in a way that increased and always going up higher in holiness. Until they made the outside, where we have to spread out the well springs, they made the outside more prepared and more ready. Not only will it be ready to accept and to receive these well springs that are being spread over there, in addition to this, that the outside itself will not just be a receiver, but the outside itself will become candles to illuminate. So that is, in general, how we find concerning the spreading of Chassidus as it began from the Baal Shem Tov and Mizrach Magid as the generations go on. So in a similar vein, the Rebbe is going to apply this concerning what the Rebbe Rashab told the Bachrim in Tomchet Mimim, that they are going to war, the war of the house of David. So too we could say concerning the words of the one whose birthday is on Chav Cheshvan, about the avodah of whoever goes out to the war of Beis David. This is an important stage and part in the general idea of spreading the well springs outward. In the period, in the era that it began the avodah of the war of the house of David, which means in the early years of the founding of Yeshivas Tomchet Mimim. This Sicha was addressed to the Bachrim about 3 years after the founding of Tomchet Mimim. Hine, at that beginning time of Tomchet Mimim, hinim nekabel bekam sibes hoya davar tzarich lisbatzeya ayde elu shei bechinas neshamas klolis binizeh. The matter had to be fulfilled by those that were general souls concerning this matter. In other words, the Rebbe is like mirroring what he said before, that there were neshamas klolias of the Talmidei HaMagid, that they had to establish Chassidus in many different locations. In a similar vein, he is saying that those students in Tomchet Mimim are like neshamas klolias in what their mission was in comparison to our generation, which is, the Rebbe explains, what are they, neshamas klolius? Elu shalamdu b'Lubavitch, those that actually studied in Lubavitch, and they were educated in the spirit of Lubavitch for a duration of time comparably. That upon them was placed this mission. They were given special powers. They should be able to affect this the way it's supposed to be, in length and breadth and depth. That was initially. But in years following that, after Yeshivas Tomchet Mimim spread out in many, many places, skip the brackets, until it spread out in the breadth of the entire world. bad bevad im ispashtes va'afotzas toiros Chassidus b'makom achutza, alongside the fact that Chassidus spread out in places that were considered outward and outside. So Tomchei Temimim and Chassidus were running these parallel tracks of being brought to many, many places outside. After all that they affected and they influenced throughout all these years. So then this avodah and shlichus became applicable also to those that take the form of balabatim, meaning they don't have to be necessarily students, they can be balabatim. Also they have to be candles to illuminate, and upon them is also incumbent the mission of the war of the house of David. And concerning the question and the wonder, how is this possible? How can I go ahead and affect what Chassidim of that generation did? When I know what my spiritual state is, especially then, there was the idea that your eyes saw your master, meaning these were Bachrim that witnessed the Rebbe Rashab and was in the presence of the Rebbe Rashab. As opposed to now, so now it's only we are remembering and we have to tell over about the one whose birthday was Cheshvan and his lessons. The response to this is, like we said before, alongside with the descent of the generations, it's demanded and necessary only a lesser avodah. And the Rebbe is going to make reference to the following. It says that in the creation of the world, it fell from the world of Tayu 288 sparks. And our mission throughout the existence of the world is to elevate and return those sparks. There's 288 sparks. It also says, V'gam erev rav ala itam, that also a mixed multitude went up with the Yidden from Mitzrayim. So Chassidus brings down that erev rav, a mixture of rav. Rav is Reish Beis, 202. That really, the amount of time that the Yidden spent in Mitzrayim, they already elevated 202 of the 288 sparks, which means that all that we're left with is 86 sparks. So he says, and this is what the Rebbe is going to build off of. Second line in the second from the bottom paragraph, similar to the difference between the refining of the 86 sparks that were left to be refined and elevated after refining the 202 sparks in Golus Mitzrayim. And in a similar vein, throughout all of the generations, it becomes less and less. So too, concerning the refining of the 86 sparks itself, from the time after the exile of Mitzrayim till these days, along with the descent that goes from generation to generation, skip the brackets, 3 lines. Now it's a much easier avoida. Also, the avoida of spreading the well springs outward is much easier. Sicha now, or in the expression of the above mentioned talk of the Rebbe Rashab, Melchemes Beis David, the war of the house of David, even though initially it was only addressed to the Bachrim of Tomchei Temimim at that time, but now, after all these generations have passed since then, it's applicable to every single Yid. And like we actually see in actuality, in the manner of the service of the leader of our generation, l'chutza, and the spreading of the well springs outward. Sha'afotza l'chutz, that the spreading outward, sha'afotza chutza, the spreading outward, loy hoysa rak ba'oysa oifen kvishoy bezman sheyom yoladas. The Frierdiker Rebbe did not limit himself to the way that the Rebbe Rashab spread Chassidus. He didn't say, listen, the Rebbe Rashab spread Chassidus by saying Sichos and saying Mamorim, and also by writing manuscripts that were eventually published. So the Frierdiker Rebbe could have done the same thing. Just, whatever my father did was enough. No. The Frierdiker Rebbe's manner and style of spreading Chassidus took on totally new types and new ways. But rather in a way of spreading to the outward of the outward of the outward. As it's known, the great effort he put in, even to self-sacrifice. To spread the wellsprings of Chassidus, both Mamorim that talk about the service of Hashem, and both Mamorim that talk about in-depth understanding of godliness. He interpreted it, and he translated it, and he had it published in newspapers, etc., to spread it so it should be able to reach every single Jewish man and woman in the language of the different nations. And he spread it in such a way that it should reach even the most minor people in knowledge of Yiddishkeit. Should be of knowledge. And should be others, and even to spread to those that are their observance of Yiddishkeit, they are the most minor of minor. How much more so he spread it even to those that are, or how much more so he spread it to those that are very minor in their knowledge of Chassidus. So we see, as the generations went on, it was spread out further and further. V'hinei oidos hashayches the teichen hasicha nal l'chol echad ve'echad miyisrael b'dereinu zeh, about the connection of the content of the sicha to every single yid in this generation. Yesh lahoisif oidinya, we have to add another idea. And this, the Rebbe is going to elaborate on a point that he said at the beginning part of the Sicha. Sicha zu nemra amnam tamidim shalom de b'shivas temchatmim b'tkufahi. The Sicha was actually spoken to the students that learned in Temchat Mimim at that period of time. Shehem shamus hadvarim ba'ifim devahoye necha rois merecha. They heard the Sicha in a way that their eyes saw their master, they saw the Rebbe Rashab. Aval afal became, despite the fact that they were living in a certain era, in this Sicha, the Rebbe Rashab was relating and proclaiming about a state that will be on a later period of time, which wasn't facing them then when the Rebbe Rashab spoke about it. Ubechlalis, and in general, the Rebbe Rashab was talking about Shnei Doiris, two distinct generations. Hadoir Arish, the first generation, Asher Cherfu Eivech Hashem, those that scoffed because they are the enemies of Hashem. Vadoir Asheni, the second generation, is Talmidi Doir Arishon, Mamshichi Darkom, the disciples of the first generation, and the one that continues in their ways, Asher Cherfu Ikvis Mshichacham, that they scoffed on the heels of Mashiach, Keloimar, Shemolchemes Beis David Shayeches B'myuchad La'elu Shnimtzoim Be'ikvus of the Mashiach Mamish. The war of the house of David is specifically applicable to those that are found in the heels of Mashiach Mamish. This is our generation more so. So even though the Rebbe Rashab addressed it to his times, but since our times is a time of Ikvus Mashiach, so obviously, this is even more applicable to us. Moving for this is understood. This job and mission was placed not only those that were present when the Sicha was being said, or at least those that are similar to those that were there then. In other words, people that learned in Tomchat Mimim, people that were within the 4 cubits of yeshiva, but rather, Ki'im l'chol elu sheshem hasicha zu higia la'oznam. The message of this about going out to war for the house of David is applicable to all those who heard about the Sicha. How do they hear about it? This was a result of the leader of our generation telling us to print and to make well known the Sicha. The fact that they heard about this Sicha, it's by divine providence. So Belashna Mishnah, like the Mishnah states, everything that Hashem created in this world, He only created it for His glory, it's for His honor. Therefore, this message of the Rebbe Sicha, the Rebbe Rashav Sicha that he said in 1900, is a directive and also an empowerment from the leader of our generation that made it well known. Shegam heim, also those that hear about it at present, tzrichim liishtatif b'milchemes beis David, have to participate in the war of the house of David. V'toichna shel milchama zu, and what is the content and mission and purpose of this war? Levatel es ha'inyan dasher cherfa evecha Hashem, to nullify those that scoff because they are enemies of Hashem, and following that, nullify those that scoffed the heels of your Moshiach. The category of Yidden that are scoffing the heels of Moshiach, we're not talking about people that are enemies of Hashem, like we mentioned earlier. We're talking about Yidden that study Torah and Yidden that fulfill mitzvahs. They cannot stand when a Yid says, hey, Mashiach is coming right now. Why is he saying this? Because we're already hearing the footsteps of the heels of Mashiach. And they can't stand it. And that is the second category that we have to fight against. This is the war of the house of David in these days. To nullify the matter of those that scoff the heels of your Mashiach. How do we nullify it? Through spreading the well springs outward. It means he goes out of his 4 cubits. Even when his 4 cubits are in Lubavitch, what can be greater? And he goes to a place that's outside. Over there, the outside is found those that scoff the heels of Mashiach. And over there he spreads out the well springs of Chassidus. The Rebbe says, and obviously this goes without saying, all this has to be done in ways of pleasantness or ways of peace. As we know, that's the way of Torah. In a way of war. So what does it mean? Pleasantness and peace and war? How do those two things fit together? So the Rebbe explains what he means by war. That a war means that a person goes with the full force and without any fear. Such a degree doesn't think at all about the danger of the war. So he should not come to, heaven forbid, transgress the command of not letting your heart falter and become soft like the Rambam rules. So that's what it means, Milchama. Milchama means a person is strong in his convictions. That's what Milchama means. Being strong in our convictions about bringing it home to everybody that Mashiach is coming. Like we said before, the way we go about it is b'darchei noyim, b'darchei shalom, in pleasant ways, in peaceful ways, and then we're successful to effect in the appropriate manner. L'sikum advarim, in conclusion, since the leader of our generation commanded to print and to make well known and to propagate this Sicha. How they move, and it's understood, Shekol Prate HaSicha, all the details of the Sicha, Kol Teva v'Teva Sheba, every single word in it, Shayachim Chol Echad v'Echad Yisrael Shenimtza B'Dor Zeh, is applicable to every single Jew that's found in this generation. Sicha zu Namra Amram B'Shan Mosiach. This Sicha was said true in a certain year. B'Maim de Matzah Miyuchad, in a special state and situation, B'Svadus Miyuchadus, in a special Fabrengen, was a Simchas Torah Fabrengen. Avol became, despite the fact that it was said at a certain time in a certain place, in this generation it's applicable, all the details of the matter, to every single Yid, and in every state. Even when we find ourselves in a country that's in the lower hemisphere, the Rebbe says the Western countries, America, whatever is considered, Australia, this is called the Western, the lower hemisphere, not the same hemisphere that the Torah was given in. And even even it's on a weekday. That year, Chav Cheshvan was in the middle of the week. The majority of the people gathered, when the Torah speaks about the majority, they're not even yeshiva bachrim. Still in all Mekol Makim, even though the state and situation who I'm addressing right now is completely different than the audience and the time when it was originally said, the matters are applicable to every single Yid, and even it's applicable to women as well. So it's not just that it's not only applicable to Yeshiva Bachrim, it's not even limited to men. This is unlimited. This is applicable to everybody, men and women, regardless what or when. Since this is demanded from us, surely everyone was given all the powers necessary for this. Like the Chazal say, that when Hashem requests, He says, I do not request only according to their capabilities. And then the Rebbe says a whole thing about not asking from someone what he cannot do, and that's why there used to be, when the person was poor, the tzedakah collectors used to hide themselves from him so that they don't ask from him what he can't do. So let's skip to the next paragraph. 3 paragraphs on the bottom. From this we come to another obligation. Since the leader of the generation gave himself away and immersed himself to print and make well known these matters for the sake of the person who's hearing this now, and to give the person the necessary power and capability to be able to do this avodah. Every person is obligated to say that the world was created for my sake. If a person does not use the powers that was given to him, Nimtza comes out, not only is he not fulfilling his job and his mission, even more so, he causes a confusion, so to say, in the job and the shlichus of the Nasi who gave it over to him. All the above is in full force throughout the entire year. How much more so when a special day in the year comes about, that then his mazel is an ascendancy, Chav Cheshvan. Surely all the matters of his teaching and his service, his directive and his holy talks, his gabras, are in a state of being overpowering. That's included in Mazoli Goiver. Therefore, the empowerment is much stronger. Okay, let's skip a little bit to the last page, to Amaisu Ha'ikar, and the action Yudches, right in the middle of the page, and the action is what's primary. Kasher Poikshim Yehudi, when we meet up with a Yid, Tzrichim Ladas, we need to know Shekol Inyanim Shuhu Chayshe Vaydes Tachlis Mataras Pkishosei. all the ideas that he's thinking, why did I meet up with this person? It's a big doubt. It's a doubt if that's the real reason why I met up with this Yid. What is clear without a doubt, that he has to affect upon him the idea of spreading the wellsprings outward. Through being involved in spreading the wellsprings outward, we merit what the Baal Shem Tov was told by Moshiach, that the Master, King Moshiach, is going to come. But Pashtus, simply put, we literally hear the heels of Mashiach. And we go out to greet Mashiach out of joy and gladness of heart, with our youth and our elderly, with our sons and our daughters, because not a single Yid will remain behind in Golus. The preparation for this is through influencing every single Yid, the Klolos Am Yisrael, and the general Klal Yisrael, to go out to the war of Beis David, and surely we are victorious in this war. David Melch Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, because David Melch Yisrael is alive and existing. We take from Miyad, and immediately by Gold Dan, and this time by Miyadim Goldim, immediately the redeemed, Geulah Mitzvah Shlema, the Mashiach Tzidkeinu, and the true and complete redemption through Mashiach. David Malch Mashiach, David the King Mashiach.